I can still hear it. That slow, metallic groan of a tow truck winch tightening at first light. The cables singing under tension like a predator finally sinking teeth into something it's been stalking for weeks. It ripped me straight out of sleep that Tuesday morning in Cedar Hollow Preserve, 6:03 a.m., the sky still bruised purple, and my stomach dropped before my brain even caught up. My name is Caleb Reed. I weld underwater for a living, deep, cold, dangerous shifts on rigs and pipelines that pay just enough to keep the lights on and the mortgage from eating us alive. And that sound meant only one thing. They were taking my truck. I stumbled out of bed, heart hammering so hard it hurt, yanked on the old terry cloth robe my wife bought me 3 Christmases ago, didn't bother with socks or slippers, and ran barefoot across the freezing tile, through the front door, out onto the dew-slick driveway. There she was, my Ram 5500, this hulking, custom-built lifeline I'd poured every overtime dollar and every scraped-together bonus into over 6 years. Flatbed loaded with underwater arc welding gear, twin oxygen bottles strapped tight, tool chests bolted down like treasure chests. The whole rolling workshop that let me come home to my family instead of living out of a duffel bag in some Gulf Coast flophouse. Chains already wrapped around the frame. Red strobe lights pulsing, the flatbed tilting upward like a drawbridge being raised. The tow driver, a guy probably my age, just collecting a paycheck, looked over when he heard my bare feet slapping concrete and gave me the universal shrug of "I don't make the rules, man." "HOA order," he said, nodding toward the clipboard. "Commercial rig. Can't stay here." And then she stepped into frame. Marissa Vaughn, president for life of the Cedar Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association, gliding across the lawn in pristine white sneakers and a pastel quarter zip, like she was about to film a Pilates reel instead of overseeing the eviction of a man's entire career. Arms folded, head tilted, just enough to look down at me, even though we're the same height, that practiced half smile that says I've already won and you're just now realizing it. She didn't shout. She recited. Calm, clipped, almost bored. Article 7, Section 3. No commercial vehicles. No trucks exceeding 1-ton rating. No visible industrial equipment or signage. You received written notice. Twice. One yellow Post-it note slipped under my wiper 6 months earlier that I'd crumpled and tossed because, sorry, not everybody can afford a second vehicle just to satisfy a rule book written for people who work from home in their sunrooms. I stood there shivering in my robe, toes curling against the cold asphalt, watching the winch pull my future up onto that flatbed inch by inch, and something inside me cracked, not broke, just cracked open enough for cold clarity to pour in. This wasn't about a truck anymore. This was about them deciding I didn't belong. I paid the $175 administrative release fee in cash, crumpled 20s handed over like I was bribing my way out of shakedown, and listened to Marissa deliver the exit line she'd clearly rehearsed. If it's back in the driveway tomorrow morning, we'll remove it again. Daily fine begins at $75. This is your courtesy reminder. Courtesy. The word tasted like rust. That afternoon, I sat alone in the garage staring at the empty rectangle of oil-stained concrete where my life used to live, and I made the first small, quiet promise to myself. I would never crawl again. So I tried to obey. 6.5 hours of brutal reorganization, dragging decades of accumulated junk out into the yard, sweeping dust, swearing at boxes labeled Christmas that hadn't seen a tree since my daughter was in preschool. I measured obsessively, truck 24 feet 2 inches bumper to bumper, garage depth 24 feet 7 inches on the nose. Mathematically possible. Barely. I aired down the rear duals until the sidewalls bulged like overfed snakes. Dropped the suspension low enough that the frame kissed the concrete lip on the way in. She fit, just, but the driver's door couldn't open more than 8 inches before it hit the wall. Passenger side, worse. The only exit was the window, head first, twisting like a contortionist, scraping elbows and pride every single time. For 3 straight days, I lived that circus routine. Dawn, roll the garage door up, crawl through the window like a thief leaving the scene of his own crime, fire the big Cummins, ease her out praying the mirrors didn't clip the frame. Evening, reverse the whole humiliating ballet in the dark, headlights off so the neighbors wouldn't get a free show, crawl out again, close the door, go inside and smile at my wife like everything was fine. My back screamed. My wife's eyes asked questions I didn't want to answer. My 8-year-old daughter started asking why Daddy kept climbing through windows like Spider-Man, but old. Then the next certified letter arrived. Violation notice. Garage door observed open in excess of 10 minutes. Fine, $250. Detrimental to neighborhood aesthetics and property values. I stood in the driveway, holding that sheet of paper, feeling the heat climb my neck, and I swear I could sense Marissa 3 houses down with binoculars and a stopwatch. This wasn't enforcement anymore. This was hunting. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a lukewarm coffee and my laptop open to county GIS maps, tax rolls, old plat records. Stuff I'd never bothered with before, because who has time when you're trying to pay bills and raise kids? And buried under 15 years of digital dust, I found it. The main artery into Cedar Hollow Preserve, that long, curving private drive every single resident used every single day, wasn't owned by the HOA. Wasn't owned by the county. Wasn't owned by anybody who'd paid property taxes since the original developer went belly up in 2009. The title had fallen through every crack in the system and just sat there, unclaimed, delinquent, waiting. And the tax foreclosure auction? 7 days away. Opening bid, $4,100. My pulse thumped in my ears, so loud I thought my wife would wake up. This wasn't a loophole. This was a loaded gun lying on the table with nobody's fingerprints on it yet. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my wife, not my buddies on the dive crew, not even my brother who's a contractor and would have talked me out of it in 30 seconds flat. I just quietly liquidated every small thing I could, cashed out a savings bond my grandmother left me, skipped 2 rig rotations to avoid travel expenses, sold the jet ski we never used anymore. By auction day, I had $4,600 in an envelope and a stomach full of adrenaline and guilt. The auction room in the county annex smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Maybe 8 people total, mostly flippers looking for foreclosed condos or empty commercial lots. When the auctioneer read 0.87-acre strip containing private access easement known as Cedar Hollow Drive, half the room didn't even look up. Nobody bid against me. I raised my hand once. $4,100. Hammer fell. Done. I walked out into blinding sunlight holding a receipt that said I now own the only road in or out of a neighborhood that had spent years telling me I didn't belong. I didn't celebrate. I planned. First call was to Darius, my oldest friend from high school welding class who now runs a small paving and site work crew. I told him exactly what I wanted and exactly why. He laughed so hard he had to pull the phone away from his mouth, then said, "Man, I'm in. But you're buying the beer for the next year." Over one long weekend, we transformed that quiet, tree-lined entrance road into something out of a revenge movie nobody asked for, but everybody deserved. 15 extra tall speed tables. Not gentle humps, real spine compressors that made low-slung sports cars wince just looking at them. Fresh, bright yellow curb paint, so glaring it hurt to stare at. Reflective signage every 40 yards screaming. Private road, max 5 miles per hour. No trespassing. Commercial vehicles, priority access. Then the gate. Nothing permanent, just heavy steel bollards on hinges, a folding table, a pop-up canopy, and Earl, a 77-year-old former Force Recon Marine who still does pull-ups every morning and who'd been my dad's best friend until the day Dad passed. Earl showed up in faded camis, Oakleys, and the calm expression of a man who'd already stared down worse than angry soccer moms. Rules were straightforward. Show a driver's license with a Cedar Hollow address, free passage. Everybody else, $12 cash toll. No exceptions. The first Monday morning hit like a bomb. A Tesla high-centered on the second speed table and lost a carbon fiber splitter. Owner got out screaming into his phone while Earl sipped black coffee and checked the address. A line of luxury crossovers snaked back half a mile, everyone creeping at literally 4 to 5 miles per hour because the guy in front was terrified of scraping. Commute times tripled. 25 minutes became an hour just to reach the highway. Delivery drivers flat out refused to enter. Amazon, DoorDash, FedEx, all started leaving access-restricted notes. Uber cancellations skyrocketed. Trash pickup skipped 2 days because the trucks wouldn't risk their undercarriages. The neighborhood imploded. Marissa called the sheriff's department before noon on day 2. 2 deputies rolled up, lights off, looking mildly curious. I handed them the certified tax deed, the survey plat, the auction receipt. They read in silence. One deputy, keyed his radio, spoke low. The other looked at Marissa, then at me, then back at her. Sir owns the road outright. It's private property. He can set reasonable rules of access, including tolls and speed limits, so long as emergency vehicles are exempted, which they are. HOA has zero jurisdiction over this parcel. Y'all sort it out. Marissa's jaw went tight enough I thought I heard teeth crack. I didn't gloat. I just thanked the deputies, shook Earl's hand, and went home to hug my daughter who'd started drawing pictures of Daddy's magic road. But the real explosion was still coming. Mornings turned into parking lot standoffs. Kids missed school buses. Elderly residents couldn't get to doctor appointments. Groceries sat in hot trunks for hours. Someone started a next-door thread titled, "Who let the welder buy our road?" that hit 400 comments in 12 hours. Petitions circulated. Someone egged Marissa's garage. Juvenile, petty, but I won't pretend it didn't make me smile in the dark. The HOA board called an emergency session and, after 3 days of nonstop complaints, invited me to attend. They sat me at the far end of the polished conference table like I was a defendant in my own trial. Marissa tried to keep her voice level, but the tremor was there. We're prepared to void every outstanding fine against your property. We'd also like to discuss purchasing the road back. At fair value, of course. I let the silence stretch until the air felt thick. Then I spoke, slow and even. Fair value sounds reasonable. My counter, $180,000 cash. All violations against me erased forever. Permanent, notarized exemption for my work vehicle. No future enforcement attempts, no letters, no tows. And the gate stays up until the funds clear. They argued. They caucused in the hallway. They came back pale. But outside those windows, horns blared, children cried in back seats, and an entire community had finally realized who actually held the keys. They agreed. 2 days later, I signed the transfer deed in a quiet title company office while Marissa sat across the table staring at her hands. Check cleared the same afternoon. I walked out $180,000 richer, debt-free on the house for the first time in 12 years. And, for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt my shoulders drop. I parked the Ram 5500 right back in the open driveway that very evening. No garage crawl, no window exit. Just me, my truck, and the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd finally stopped running. Marissa resigned from the board the following Thursday. Rumor says she listed her house within a week and moved to a gated high-rise downtown. No HOA, no neighbors, just glass and anonymity. I didn't cheer when I heard. I just nodded and kept going. A couple months later, I had one last thing made. A solid bronze lug nut, oversized, polished to a mirror shine, mounted on a low granite plinth right at the entrance where the old gate used to stand. No inscription, no explanation, just a giant, gleaming piece of hardware sitting there like a trophy nobody could take away. Every morning, I still leave before sunrise for whatever dive job is next. Tools rattle in the bed, coffee steams in the cup holder, and as I roll past that lug nut, I feel the same quiet thing every time. Not triumph exactly, but closure. The kind you earn when the system tries to crush you and you politely refuse to be crushed. My wife sleeps better now. My daughter doesn't ask about Spider-Man windows anymore. The mortgage payment is gone, and the extra money went straight into a college fund I'd been pretending I'd start next year for too long. And yet, late at night, when the house is still and the only sound is the refrigerator humming, I sometimes catch myself wondering. I fought a bully. I protected my family's future. I turned the same petty power games they used against me right back on them until they choked on their own rules. Every bit of it was legal. Every bit of it was earned. But I also made innocent people suffer. Moms racing to daycare, retirees missing chemo appointments, working parents losing hours in pay because their daily drive became a slow-motion nightmare. I aimed at one person and hit dozens. So where exactly does justified self-defense end and vengeance begin? Was I the hero of my own story? Or did I just become a different flavor of the same small tyrant I despised? I still don't have a clean answer. Maybe there isn't one. All I know is that some mornings, when the sun hits that bronze lug nut just right and it flashes like it's winking at me, I let myself smile, just a little, and drive on. Because sometimes the only way to make the powerful remember what fairness feels like is to take the wheel away from them for a while. Thanks for sitting with me through all of this. If you've ever stared down an HOA that thought it was God, or fought for your little piece of ground when everyone told you to just roll over, you're not crazy. And you're not alone. Drop your thoughts below. What would you have done? Where's the line for you? Hit like if this hits something real inside you. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't sugarcoat the messy parts of standing up. I'll see you in the next one. Stay tough out there.